Doodle-doo, doodle-doo. Doodle-doo, doodle-doo. Come on. Are we live? Are we live? Are we live? Just want to check and make sure everything's working okay. Of course, Twitch wants me to watch an ad first, so hold on here 1 second. I'm seeing the mic and everything, so we're going to assume everything's working okay. I screwed up once for those of you who didn't actually watch, and I recorded half a video without having the audio on. So I'm pretty adamant about making sure that my audio works now and make sure I'm not doing anything stupid, but I haven't done anything since. So I think I'm going to assume that we're good to go. I think it's strange that my Twitch on the iPad is not showing that we're live, but whatever. I guess we'll, when it pops up, I'll start getting in the chat room. So thanks for joining me today. What we're going to talk about is the Vue CRM that we've been building over the last couple of weeks. I've joined into this 100 Days of Code movement that's happening on Twitter. It's pretty cool. I didn't hear anything about it, and I've started. I guess I've always been in development, but I'm starting to push harder on it to get myself more involved. You'll have to forgive my voice. I'm kind of getting sick, kind of getting over sick. I'm not entirely sure, but in any case, my voice is all sorts of jacked up. So, yeah, this is what it sounds like. I'm still trying to find out how to get to this damn chat panel. Chat. How do we chat? I don't know. My thing is not telling me I'm live. I don't know why it's not letting me get air chat. All right. There we go. Hey, chat room. Sweet. Okay, cool. So we're here. So I can see the chat. If you guys want to chat with someone, maybe that's cool. I'll answer questions as it comes up. But what I'm going to do today is we're going to do some further work on the API. We're not pretty much going to touch the UI today. We're going to run for about 30 minutes, and then I'm going to have to wrap it up at that point. But we're going to continue building out the API. We're going to create some tests for the controllers. For the customer's controller, we're going to create some tests for the routes. So I'll show you guys how to do that, and we're also going to install custom-env, which will let us create different environment files for our different stages or different modes, I guess, if you will. What am I looking for? There's a word for it, and I can't think of it right now. It is different modes, I guess we'll call it for now. So with that, let's get started. I actually have not seen this in a little bit. It's been a whole week since I looked at it, so I have to reaccommodate myself and figure out where we're at right now. So let's see. We're going to do npm test. We'll let this guy run, see if this works. And it breaks. So let's go figure out what broke and why it broke. See, modules throw, cannot find module, source components, customers, models. Okay, let's go look at, oh yeah, I was doing a little bit of tweaking on here, so it looks like I just didn't save this properly. Let's go ahead and save this. And also what I've done is I have a custom, let's see, go to packages.json. My test script does a couple things here. The first thing it does is sets the node environment to test, which is an environment variable. This is what we're going to use to make sure we pull in the right environments, the environment file, the .env file. And then I run nodemon to execute mocha. Recursive means it's going to search down through my folders. And then my pattern of files that I'm looking for is this src, my source folder, any subdirectories, and look for any files that basically have that end in spec.spec.js. So I've done a lot of playing around with tests over the last week. And one of the things I've come to realize that works out pretty well is storing your tests with your code. I've seen people store it directly next to the routes and the controllers. I don't like that because I think it clutters up the folder and takes the focus off of the actual code files. It's personal preference. So what I've done is I create a subfolder called tests, and then I store the actual tests themselves inside of here. So you can see here I got models. By the time we're done, hopefully if we have time, we're going to have the controller.spec.js and routes.spec.js. So with that, let's see. So that created a customer, and what we did is all we did was just validate it here. So we created a new customer, validated, made sure that it validates and is created, and make sure there are no errors that are assigned to this variable here. There is another way we can do this, and I think it is .isNew. So if we do console.log, customer.isNew, I think it's going to return true because it hasn't written to the database. IsNew is not a function. Is it a attribute? I don't remember, honestly. Yeah, true. Okay, so it's new. So when you create a model, when you create an object using a model in Mongoose, it's going to flag it with is new until it actually writes it to the database. We're not writing it to the database now, so it is going to show is new, but I don't think we really need to in this case. If we were going to send it up through a controller and let it save, then yeah, I would say we would do that, but we're going to leave that the way that it is right now. Okay, moving on. So let's see, we've got customers. All we have is first name and last name in here. So if that's fine for now, we'll continue moving forward on that. Let's see what else I got here. Controller, I've created create customers, got get customers, update customer. Okay, so all right. Let's start off with controllers. We're gonna create tests for every single one of our functions on our controllers. Before we do that, we're actually gonna comment all this out. The reason we're gonna do that is because we want to write tests and we want them to fail initially. If you're trying to accommodate test-driven development, which I sure like to do, I'm still kind of new to unit testing or integration testing, so bear with me. We're gonna, we're kind of doing this as we go. But I do know red-green refactor. I've heard that many times before, so I know you're supposed to write a failing test, then refactor it to, or then get it to pass, and then you refactor it and continue to keep it passing. And the nice thing about unit tests or any kind of integration tests or any testing at all, I know there's unit tests, there's integration testing, there's end-to-end testing. I'm more familiar with the first two. Less so on end-to-end testing, but we'll get there. Is if you can keep it up and as you make changes to your code and modify and things go through, as long as the test pass, you've got a pretty good chance that the changes you're making aren't going to break anything. That's definitely not a certainty, but it sure does help. It kind of stops you from shooting yourself in the foot, So we commented out our controller. We're going to go into tests and we're going to create a new file. We're going to call this controller.spec.js. And let's see here. We're going to import a couple of different libraries and files. The first one we're going to do is we're going to import, let's see, we have constants up here. Assert equals required dot assert. And this is what's going to basically test to see if everything is, it's going to test to make sure that we expect the correct thing. So we've imported assert. Let's see, import assert. We also want to import the actual controller itself. Const controller equals require. Let's see. We can go back up a folder and hit the controller file. There we go. So now we have to start. Excuse me. We're going to have to start actually writing out our test files here now. So let's see here. What do I want to start off with? Describe. Describe is where you start off with. It kind of lets you step down into a hierarchy of a test suite or a test file. So describe, I like starting mine with the type of module that we're in. So also further defining out my structure of my folders I do here. I start, all my code is stored in a source folder. I used to have this test folder. We don't need this that. Everything's stored in the so it's away from the node modules folder and the package.json files. So in here, my top level, I guess entry points are app and server. And the reason I have two of them is because I eventually want to use this in AWS, and you have to separate those out, at least from what I understand and what I'm reading. I used to store things in separate folders, so I'd have a controllers folder, I'd have a models folder, I'd have a routes folder. But I've read recommendations that storing like concepts together is always a good thing, and I've recently adapted a method of using modules and then my module name, so to speak. So in this case, customers. If I had users, I do like my other project I'm working on. I've got users, I've got authentication, I've got addresses. That's just an example, but each one of those are separated out individually. And the reason why I started doing that is in my somewhat forward thinking. I may eventually want to split each of these out into their own projects, and if it's going to make it easier to import things, I also surface all the code that I want to from the inside of those modules outside using an index.js, which we might have time to do today. I'll show you how that works. So, but with that, let's go ahead and kind of move on here. So, controller spec describe, we're going to do customer tests, and then I do :controller, because that's how it's going to display on the right-hand side over here. See, I have customer tests and models, customer test controller. So we don't need another describe category because, we're staying with, we're only going to actually test the controller. Models, I'll create sub-describes, subdescribes. So this way I can indicate which folder I'm actually describing. So, all right, I did that wrong. So we want to do arrow function into open close bracket, close that out. All right, so now we're going to do it, and IntelliSense is trying to screw with me. It should, what do we want to do first? Should get a list of customers. I don't know if any are saved here. Actually, you know what? Should save a customer. All right, so we're going to async this guy because we're going to need to. Async arrow function, open close bracket, and here's where we start writing our code. Now when you're writing tests, the method that I've read and has worked well for me is using the 3 A's, arrange, act, and assert. So we're going to separate this out through comments so you can see what I'm doing here. Act, assert. So arrange is where you're going to set the test up, act is where you execute the actual code itself, and assert is where you test that the results of the functions you've executed match what you expect them to match. That being, when you expect them to match, sometimes your expectations can be incorrect. So, you know, that's kind of the magic of this, because you want to make sure that the test fails first, because if it passes first and you expect it to fail, that is certainly a misunderstanding on your part, which there's nothing wrong with that. That just means you have to go back and figure out what you missed. So customer, we're going to do let new customer equals, let's see, open the, just create a generic object, first name. Let's see, whose name do we like? Let's figure out a name. Whose name? Robin Williams. Robin Williams came up with me recently. It was a tragedy that he passed away a few years ago. I used to watch a lot of his content when I was growing up, so that was kind of sucked, but we'll go ahead and use his name there in his honor. So we arranged our data like that. We're going to act on it by doing, let's see. What I will do is I will do, let's see. What's the best way to do this? Await. We do all my controller functions are all asynchronous. So we'll do await controller dot create customer, and I'm going to pass this in as an array because I like creating everything to accept arrays. It lets you execute multiple, it lets you work with multiple objects at the same time, as opposed to having, because if you ever want to send multiple customers up to this API, you don't want to just handle one at a time, because that's going to be multiple calls, and especially if you're in something like AWS where they charge you on a execution time per call, I mean, that could get a little pricey. So we're going to pass it in as an array, even though it's only one. So we're going to await create controller, and let's see here. What can we do here? I want to see. I'm actually going to return this. So we're going to do let created customers equals that. And I think if we set this up properly, it should actually return back the data that it's created. So we want to, let's see. We want to assert that equals, let's see, I think it's strict equals or deep, strict equals. So strict equals make sure that your code, make sure that your the attribute you're checking and the attribute that you expect is not coerced from type to type. So a string is not coerced to an integer or a number. A string is not coerced to a date, etc. So we want to do the strict because I don't like coercion. If we can avoid it, we like to control the code and make sure that nothing is happening, as little is happening automatically as possible, which is a strange statement for JavaScript because it's a very dynamic language. But if you the more you can control, the better off you're going to be, because you're going to have less potential bugs, I guess, arise. So we want to assert that the check customers, created customers. We want to take the first object, because this is an array, and we want to, I'm going to take a wild guess here, and we're going to actually console log this so we can see what it's spitting back at us. But first name, I think that should work. So when the controller creates the customer, it's going to return back the data that it created, because it has to actually create it given an ID and then return it back. When it gets returned back, I think it's going to return it back as an array. We pass it into as an array. It's going to return it back to us as an array. And then it's going to, we want to check that the object it created, the first name, matches up with the first name of our new customer. So the new customer object has first name. These are both strings, so we don't have to do any kind of conversion before we test them here. So I'm going to save this, and you're going to notice it is going to fail, and Mocha is going to complain to me, and that's fine. That's expected. That's what we want to see. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to console.log. We know it's going to fail because we commented the code out, or in theory, we would have never created it in the first place, which is test-driven development. You write the test first and use the test to drive the development. So console.log created customers, and we're going to see created customers. We're going to see what that spits back, which is not going to do anything now because the function doesn't exist. So, but if we go over to the controller, we're going to uncomment this guy here. And the other thing I'm going to do is, should I? Yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to try catch this. Try catch. I like to try catch everything because another question I actually reached out on Twitter is I work on a project at work. It's a C#. It's an API where the try catches are only happening at the surface level. So any errors that happen in some of the deeper layers will bubble up to the top and then display themselves. The problem with that, at least from my experience, and it's kind of confirmed with some of the individuals I spoke with on Twitter, is you lose some of the context of where the error occurs. So the more context you can get behind an error, the quicker that you can jump to the code that's causing the problem, therefore fixing it and deploying out a fixed version. So I'm going to catch the error, throw new error, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do error.message for now. We'll eventually can rewrite this into a custom error object that can capture the stack and spit it back at us, but we're going to leave that as it is for now. So, all right, so let's see. The other thing we're going to do is we want to turn await because this is asynchronous, and we want to wait until this operation is completed before we actually spit back the code to us. So create customer is not a function because we're create customers. So we don't need that file open now. We don't need that file open now. We don't need that file open yet. Create customers. Let's go ahead and save this again. Let nonmon execute our tests. See what happens. Okay, make sure done is called So one of the things I have not done yet is I've not actually set up the test to open a connection to the database beforehand, which is why we're failing now. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to fix that now. If I go into app.js, you can see my connection string is this guy here. I'm going to move this, actually. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this and I'm going to move this into a helper function. So we're going to do create a new folder called helpers, and we're going to create a new file in here called dbhelper.js. So we want to import mongoose, const mongoose equals require mongoose, because mongoose is going to be going to connect, and then I'm going to export a single function called connect. And this kind of consolidates all my code to connect into the database all in one spot. So I hope that this is actually, I hope I'm actually seeing the chat, because I'm not seeing anybody on here right now, which is fine, but I want to actually know that if someone's chatting with me that I can chat, so whatever. We're going to do this, and we're going to async this function as well. Need arrow. It's an arrow function. It's called an arrow function for a reason. Put that damn arrow in there. So we're going to paste this stuff in here and not delete it because that's dumb. So our connection string is that. We're going to break this out into, if we do have time, which I'm running a little short on time here, if we do have time, we're going to go ahead and put this into an environment variable. And instead of having this hard-coded in here, it'll be into an environment variable. And the reason that is beneficial is because as we change environments in our application and we move it from dev and test and staging and production, etc., you store those outside of the code. It's not hard-coded, so you store it outside of the code. You have less of a chance of bugs happening, basically. Nothing has to change as it moves from phase to phase. So now, because we move this in, let's see, I don't have mongoose in here, so we're going to get rid of that. We don't need this here anymore. What I am going to do is I'm going to let's see, we're going to import that DB helper that we just created. So const DB helper equals require, let's see, dot helpers, DB helper. And then we'll do DB helper dot connect. So I can't await this here because this is not an await function. This is just a main function. So we'll fix that later. We'll save that. We're gonna get rid of these two guys. But in our controller.spec, that's what we're gonna do here as well. So we're gonna do const DB helper require. We gotta go all the way back up to the helpers we just created. DB helper. All right, good. And now we want to add in here a before each. So this basically means that before each function, each test is executed below, it's going to run whatever we have inside of this block here. And what we want to do is we just want to await DB helper dot connect. And as long as I got that right, this should work now, which it did. And we have a passing test as well. And you can see I also did a console.log on the created customers just to verify that I can see visually what it returned back. It did return back exactly what I expected it to, the first name, the last name, as well as the ID. So that is awesome. We have a passing test. And now we know that our operation to create a customer does succeed. Let's see. Use new part. I'm going to go ahead and add this guy in here because this just gets rid of this message. Let's see, if I go back into my DB helper function, it's just, I guess Mongoose uses an older version of the MongoDB APIs or library. This use new URL parser true uses a newer version of whatever that function is. I should know more about that, but I don't. So if I save it, that error should go away. And it does. Awesome. So we have the save customer. We're going to go on and kind of do the same thing. So it should get a list of customers back. Get a list of customers back from where? We don't need to add that context in here. So we're going to async this as well. Create an arrow function. Let's see. We don't really need to arrange anything here. We just really need to act as far as I could tell. So let customers equals await controller get customers. Get customers, and we don't want to pass anything. We will create a separate test to make sure the functionality to query the data comes back, but we're not going to do that right now. So then we need to just assert that assert strict equal. Let's see. So actually, I don't think we need to test for equality here. We could just use assert. If you just use assert by itself, you can pass in any statement that will resolve in a Boolean, and it will work. Chat. Join while Brian. I am joined. All right, whatever. So we want to assert that customers.length is greater than 0. So we could console log this as well to see how many customers I have in my database. Log customers.length. All right. Controller.get customers, yeah, okay, all right. We kind of expected that because we don't have the actual function written yet. So get customers, we're going to go ahead and clear this guy out. We're going to uncomment that, get customers. We're going to try catch this as well. Let's see, get rid of that, put that there. ERR. And one of the things that I did, and I'm not going to do this yet, we're going to get rid of that, and we're going to get rid of that. Actually, you know, we'll duplicate that. Go away. Search function. We're going to duplicate that, get rid of that, and get rid of that. We eventually, when the next time I think I do this, we're gonna figure out how to pass a query into here, so this way it queries the database and returns back. If there's no query, it will return back all customers. If there's a query, it will query the data. So we're going to throw same thing. Throw new error. Actually, I'm just going to copy and paste this from up here because we don't need to type that all out again. This is that parse query, which I guess we will get into next time. So go ahead and save that. See if we get a pass. We got a pass. And you can see here's our console log. There's 5 customers currently in our database. So that's good. I've seen it before where you can actually use the before and before each to connect to the database, wipe it out, create customers, and gives you a little more concrete tests, but we're not going to delve that far into it. I've got about 5 minutes here, so we wrote a couple of tests for our controller to make sure that the controller works. I'm not going to do routes today because I frankly don't have time, but I did promise that I would go ahead and implement the custom-env and show you how that works. So we're going to do that. We're going to close out of my active testing session. We're going to do an npm install save custom-env. Got that right? Okay, let's give it a second and let that install. All right, so that's installed. Now, one of the cool things that we can do is we can create different environment variable folders. We want to create that at the top level, which is also why I like breaking the source out into the bottom, because the custom-env package will pull .env files from the running directory, which in this case is where package.json exists. So we're going to create a new file. We're going to call it, oh, wrong one. We're going to create a new file. We're going to call it .env.test. All right, there's our .env.test. So in here, you can actually specify your environment variables. So we're going to do app env equals test. I like having that as a backup. We're actually also going to move our, let's see, we're going to go in for our helper, and we're going to get rid of this guy, and we're going to move this over to our .env folder, or .env file. So we will specify this as dbcs for connection string. And we'll leave that like that. I don't know if I can put quotes around that. We're going to give that a shot. So in our DB helper, we can get rid of this. Actually, we're going to leave that there, but we're going to replace this with, all right, I think I'm getting ahead of myself. So let me show you how to actually import this first. The way that you do this is you don't actually assign this to a constant, but if you do require custom-env, which is the package we just set up, is your .env. You got to put true in here. You can specify, .env will load by default the regular .env folder. If you put a true in here, this is like saying, look at my node_env environment variable and load a file that matches .env. Whatever that is. So in our packages.json folder, I use this set node env to test. And I also want to point out it is important that there are 0 spaces before test and after test, otherwise it throws this process off. But I put in here set node env equals test. This sets that environment variable to test. And the custom env package, if you set this to true, will reference that, and it will pull in the file that is named .env.test, and then we can reference any variable in here. Now this is cool for testing, but once you get into putting your app into production, you can use environment variables. Like I use Azure DevOps, their CI pipeline tools, and I will put my environment variables inside the actual deploy process, the deploy part of the pipeline. So when it publishes the code up to AWS Lambda, it has those environment variables in there. So that's really nice. That always stays the same. So now I can write the code, not worry about changing things before I set it up for production. I just publish it. So, okay, moving on here. So now if we set this here, it should import, it should actually import everything in here into our process.env parameters, I think. So here what I can do is process.env.db_cs, which is what we just said, and to be sure we can console.log this. Console.log connection string, and we'll save this. And because our unit tests are actually calling unit integration, because our tests are calling this file, we will see this actually execute. So let's do npm test to execute our tests again. And if I did this right, you can see there's where it's executed one time. It executes it before each function, so it's executed it multiple times. So here's where it pulled that in. See that? So now, if I want to, and the real magic of this happens like if I want to create multiple versions of my code and work them locally. So if I wanted to create a Vue CRM _ dev database, what I can do is I copy this. Let's rename this to dev.dev, and we can do _.dev. Actually, no, before I even do that, I'm going to undo what I did here so you can see what I'm talking about. So we'll leave that there. Our new database is now _dev, and we're going to change this to dev as well, so that matches. And then when I come into, let's see here. When I come into, what am I looking for? Packages.json. I'm going to actually update this set node env equals dev, and then which does exactly what I just did there. It sets the node environment variable dev. So now when I run npm start, it's going to pull in those variables instead. So we're going to open up another console. I'm just going to split this window here. We'll leave the top up there. The console.log is going to execute, and we should see Vue CRM dev. And the tests are connecting to one database, and my development version on that I'm running to actually test using something like Postman or use our actual our GUI is going to show something completely different. So you have some of that separation there, which is pretty awesome. So let's cd to R1, and we want to go to Vue and API, npm start. You see, here's a command that wrote. Here's the console.log. So my public API is now connected to Vue CRM _ dev. And here's where we're connected here. Now do I have routes working here? I have a get route. I don't have ID. I could show you this real quick. All right, so we're going to get rid of that. We'll eventually come back and retrofit this all to be in here. So I can see that I've bound customer routes to /API /customers. So now, excuse me, I could test this with PowerShell, and you can see, even though if you recall earlier up here, we had shown that there were 5 customers in our database at that time. A couple more customers have been created, so there are more customers now. But if I do this is completely off the cuff, so hopefully this works. If I do invoke web request, method get URI localhost, let's see, HTTP //localhost 8082 /API /customers. Do we get anything? You could see Morgan recorded that we did get a get. And if I do, let's do this again, but let's do response. I know I could do this in Postman, but I could do this quicker here. So, and we'll do res pipe into convert from JSON. You can see data here. Data here is where my customers would usually be returned. There are none because we basically just created this database off the fly. And you can see the API is actually being accessed because Morgan has some output here. So now we actually have 2 databases that we can use at our discretion. You can set up different. If you want to set up a staging environment, you could do that. Your production environment, your database can be named completely different. And what I've done in my production app, which we will get around to doing here, is I've started, well, I guess backing up even from there, I've started learning a little bit more about functional programming. So I've broken out these different, let's see here. I've broken out in here these different variables. I've got the host, the port, the database name, the username and password. I can actually create a builder, a connection string builder inside of my DB helper file. So this way, again, I don't have to store all of that data in there. It's all componentized, and it builds the connection string on the fly and always knows how to output exactly the same thing. So, but with that, I'm a couple minutes over here, but I think we did pretty good today. I'm going to go ahead and sign out. Thank you for watching for those who did. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to contact me on Twitter. My handle is Brian Morrison ME. You can reach out to me on Facebook. You can reach out to me on Twitch. I don't know if you can reach out to me on Twitch. I'm still not totally familiar with Twitch, but you can do it. Hopefully, YouTube, whatever you want. You know, provide your feedback and follow and subscribe to any of the channels that I got. Thanks a lot, and everybody have a good rest of the week. I'll see you guys next week at 8 o'clock.